That's when you push your gun fingers off.
This is the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass series, celebrating over 25 years of drum and bass in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along. It is another episode of the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass podcast, and by now we're showcasing some of the originators of New Zealand drum and bass, whether it be drum and bass DJs, producers, promoters, or MCs. And speaking of MCs, we're heading to Christchurch right now for a man that is one of the foundation layers. He's a legend, and his name is Camo Mc. How you doing, bro?
Good, brother. Good to be here.
How long has it been since you and I have been on a stage dropping bombs and dropping bars?
Well, the first time that we jammed together was Double Happy in 2007. And that was me auditioning to have a spot with you on the stage at Fat 08 because I messaged about, must have been 7 or 8 of my favourite drum and bass DJ producers on MySpace. This shows how long ago it was in itself. That was the main social media network platform. I messaged Concord, yourself, and a few others. And you got back to me and had a jam with you. And then, we rocked the Fat 08 stage together on the main stage.
Yeah, I remember that vividly. And I think there was some video kicking around of that as well, which was freaking awesome. This is one thing I've wanted to talk about in the podcast that I haven't got around to yet was that festival, Fat, bro. Jesus Christ, some of the effort it took to get there, and then some of the scenes that went down at those parties were just off the chain, right?
Yeah, and the really cool thing about Fat is that they were really supportive of up and coming artists, and even had like whole stages dedicated to people that weren't really a big name or still building, which is a lot rarer in the festivals today. So salute to Fat for really supporting the up and coming jungle drum and bass scene in Aotearoa. I mean, it wasn't really up and coming at that point. It was already pretty crazy. And the fact it was called Drum and Bass Camp, I still love that.
Yeah. And not only that, we'd have Andy C, Pendulum, fucking all the biggest names, like the best names in good drum and bass at the time, you know what I mean? It was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Some of the stories I remember, myself, Clute, D-Bridge, I think State of Mind, we're all in a van and the driver fell asleep at the wheel and just all sorts of shit heading back to, it was a 3-hour drive from Nelson into the middle of the West Coast in Ngangahua, which was the fucking armpit of the universe, really. Absolutely beautiful place. But it was just in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, one of the most ruthless ones, because of course being from Christchurch in the south, we were just driving directly over. I think it was going as a punter the year before we performed Fat 07, there was an 8-hour wait in the line. That was the most ruthless line wait of all time. They cleaned it up.
I think that even made the news.
We had these guys in front of us, this rich couple in their really nice car, cranking really obnoxious house music that we had to listen to for 8 hours because we realised that their sound system went louder than ours. So we tried to drown them out, but we weren't successful.
The old car park sound clash, it's never going to work, is it? You're going to roll up with the best gear, or it's not happening.
Yeah, we were underprepared.
Well, let's go back to the start, bro. You've been, as far as I can remember back, sort of around the mid-2000s is when you sort of started coming through the Christchurch scene. I remember you popping up on stages here and there when I was down. You were performing with the locals and all that sort of shit. And I was like, man, this guy's got bars. He's awesome on stage. And when did you really catch the bug for emceeing over drum and bass?
It was 2005, 2006. I had actually did a music course just before that. I studied radio straight out of high school, and I'd done a few courses. I was like a serial studier. I didn't want to get a job, so I just jumped from course to course. And I actually did a course where I wanted to learn how to be a DJ. And it was funny, my Wins case manager at the time actually put me onto the course. I don't know if that would happen if you went to Wins these days and said you wanted to be a DJ. And one of my tutors was a hip-hop MC, that goes by the name of Aries, absolute legend. He's done stuff with Pacific Heights, toured with Shapeshifter, but at that point he was still up and coming, but a lot more versed in rapping than me. And we're around the same age. We both blazed up, so we'd chill, smoke, and he would freestyle to me at parties, and that's when I started just like freestyling. And then later on, after that, I caught the drum and bass bug and saw MCs like GQ, Dynamite performing at the Ministry, and I didn't see them straight away and go, I want to be an MC. But when I was at the course, I struggled with the bass, and I was on the bass, but I struggled because my hand-eye coordination isn't great, and I've always been good at like English and writing, and I'd hosted on a couple of stages just like introducing bands and stuff, so it was really logical from all those elements to end up getting on the mic. So when I first got clean and sober in around 06, I just went and a couple of my mates were like, we're going to get some decks. They bought some cheap Newmark decks off one of my bro's neighbours. They're like, we're going to be DJs. And I'm like, sweet, I'll be your MC. And bought like a really cheap shit mic from the Rock Shop or CJ's Music Shop here in Christchurch, I think it was actually. And
both legendary establishments, I might add.
Yeah, CJ's. I think it was actually CJ's up on the top of, what's it called? Colombo Street. And yeah, so, or his shop might have been somewhere else actually then. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. We're going back 16, 15 years now. But yeah, that's how I got started. Yeah.
Nice. And I mean, being in Christchurch, obviously Christchurch had such a strong position in the world of drum and bass for a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
Especially during those early days, you know, it was looked upon as, you know, the second London almost. And some of the, you know, just the caliber of DJs that were coming through and playing at Ministry and all that sort of shit. When was your first opportunity to get on the mic with an international?
My first international jam actually was with D-Bridge. Now, I wasn't on the bill with D-Bridge, but I was emceeing with local legends at the time, Hank and Offset. Now, we'd practiced this set together for weeks, and I feel a little bit bad for how the story ends, but it started off like Menace was opening. Menace was opening, the legend himself.
Shout out, man. Shout out the man, the Weka fisherman. Big shout out to Menace, man, legend.
Man, yeah, he's pretty much retired these days, but man, he was
I know.
He's an absolute weapon. I won't go into too many stories about Menace.
No, we can't. We just can't.
But I got on the mic.
For all the people out there who are wondering what we're talking about at the moment, there's a producer, DJ from Christchurch going by the name of Menace, who wrote some pretty big tracks with guys like Technic and Dose over the years. Got some good releases under his belt, but just he was more of a hobbyist producer rather than trying to sort of make it on the world stage. If I'm not taking a liberty, but yeah. Carry on. Sorry.
yeah. So I ended up jamming with Menace, and then might have jammed with someone else too before D-Bridge got up, and then I ended up rolling with D-Bridge. It just happened to happen, and it was really cool. It was great. At one point, I was getting distracted by some girls in the crowd, and D-Bridge like gave me a visual, like telling me off, like watch the mix, like pointing at the mix, like focus on what you're doing. But it was a cool experience. I remember he dropped this tune with Break and Nico. I can't remember the name of the tune, but he reloaded it 3 times at the end of the set. This was at Double Happy again, and that was cool. Was a real night, but I didn't actually end up emceeing with Hank and Offset. They were real off me because my mic stuffed out. I had no voice when it came to their set, the guys I was supposed to MC with. Sorry to Hank and Offset. And then the next time, my first official booking with a drum and bass international was I was hanging out with Andre Tristan at the time, Gamble too. They were representing pretty hard and promoting a lot of there was kind of like 2 crews. There was Wise that were doing the darker neurofunk sort of sound, and there was Urban Notion who were doing a lot more liquid dance floor jump up. We didn't really call it liquid dance floor and jump up weren't really thrown around as terms back then. It was just the more dance floor focused, maybe slightly cheesier sounds, although they loved all styles of drum and bass. And basically I was jamming with my bro Retrack a lot, and I hit up Andre. I was really trying to prove myself to them, and I said, and I'd done a few shows for them, like literally playing like liquid nights to like absolutely nobody on a Wednesday night, and it was very much like that back then. You paid your dues, you showed that you were dedicated, and then you got your spot if you were good enough. And I basically said, you should get me and my bro Retrack on the bill to open, because we were doing a really cool set together. And he was like, yeah, well, how would you like to open for DJ Hype and Daddy Earl? And I was like, yes, please. And then it turned out that Example, who went on to perform with Lomax as Lodestar later on, at the time he was one of the Ram Record Golden Boys. And as you know as well, Andy was much more hands-on with the label back in those days. They were very selective with what artists would jump onto Ram. There'd be like 3 or 4 signees at the time. I think at the time it was Example, maybe Culture Shock starting, maybe Sub Focus as well. So Example ended up being on the bill. Andre rang me up and said, look, Example's asked for a good MC if I know one, and I've suggested you. So I got to MC with not only my bro Retrack, but I got to host with Example and open for Hype and Daddy Earl. And it was a moment I'll never forget, having MC Daddy Earl have his arm around me and yelling out to the crowd, make some noise for Camo MC. He might have even said, make some noise for this guy. I don't know. He might not have known my MC name, but I do remember him saying, make some noise for Camo, or asking my name. And anyone old school knows how much of a legend Daddy Earl is in the scene. Doesn't tour as much as he used to, but yeah, him and Hype have done some massive tunes together as well. So that was a really cool moment for me.
What's it like when you get that kind of accolade from one of your heroes? Man,
it means more than any big crowd or anything. It's one of the most crazy experiences. One of the other ones I had was I got to open and close with. I've been able to perform with alongside Andy C a couple of times, and back in those days he was touring with MCGQ. And if people don't know GQ, he is one of the forefathers of jungle drum and bass. He was literally He was
the voice of drum and bass.
Yeah, man.
Period.
And I remember Andre, again from Urban Ocean Truth, looking down at the crowd, and we're in the VIP, and he was like, I will shed a chair when that man passes away, because he personifies jungle and drum and bass. And it's a quote I'll never forget. And then after my set, I was having a chat to GQ, because he actually was watching me and the bro Grade at the time jamming afterwards. This was at the Bedford in 2009 or 10, just before the quakes. One of the last shows at the Bedford before the earthquakes. And GQ was there sipping his brandy, watching me and Grade perform. And then after the show, because I had this jacket that my partner at the time had bought me, and I didn't know where it was. And the whole time I was on stage, I was just worrying about where this jacket was. And I said to GQ...
Someone's jacked your jacket.
Yeah, I said to GQ, you know what, I'm glad I found this jacket, because if I went home at 6 a.m, my partner would be understanding. She knows what I did. But if I went home without the jacket, she'd be really upset at me. And GQ goes, I know what you're saying, bro. And then he just turned to me and he said, I really like what you did up there. And to me, that was I think that's the pinnacle for me in my set and my times as an MC, having MC GQ. He didn't necessarily say you're the best MC I'm heard, but I kind of thought about it, and it's for him, coming from the birthplace of jungle, coming to the other side of the world, seeing a European Pakeha guy in New Zealand bringing his own translation to jungle music, I can't imagine how crazy that would be for these guys that started it. So that's a moment I'll never forget.
Yeah, it is crazy. I do remember when those guys used to come out, and especially when they got to Christchurch, and they'd see what it was like at the Ministry, just electrified in that warehouse / club /
what a venue,
dungeon.
What a venue.
It's hard to explain. If you never got to experience the Christchurch Ministry, then you'll hear us talking about it fondly throughout the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass podcast, because it is such a monumental. It's like a pillar of Christchurch's early drum and bass.
And New Zealand. And it's really hard to explain to people. I totally agree. I try and explain the vibe, the feeling, the dance floor, the pit. When you first walked into Ministry and you look down those steps into the dance floor and experience the bass hitting you from those stairs. It's really, and I've tried explaining it to the next generation coming through, I've got a little cousin out here, my actual cousin. You know, I know we call everyone our cousin in New Zealand, but my actual cousin, one of my proudest moments is he's now a drum and bass DJ, you know, by his own account. You know, I might have inspired him in some way, but it really, you know, and that is what a lot of 18 to 25-year-old dudes and ladies are doing now. You know, it's a common hobby is be a drum and bass DJ in New Zealand. And I was trying to explain to him what the ministry and him and his mates about the ministry, and it's really hard to put into words. It really is.
It was a very, very special place. It was, I mean, a lot of it was the essence of unity that went on there, because obviously we all stumbled across drum and bass together as a city, you know, in Christchurch and in Auckland as well, because I was in between two different scenes. But I mean, the differences were vast. Christchurch had a real community that was, you know, people that had just discovered this music. We were all sharing the same tapes, and we were all going to the same record stores, or we were all going to the same weekly club nights. And it just was like everyone was on a first name basis, and it felt like the scene was small, but then you get these big parties at the ministry where 1,500 people would roll through in a night, and you realize that you're onto something like far more like diverse and rich, like as far as the music went, you know what I mean?
There is a video clip that showcases ministry, and it's a special one for me because I was actually hosting that night, and it is the video clip of the Upbeats and MC Chemo, the tune Carousel. So when I started emceeing, I had two goals, and one major goals. One was to MC with the Upbeats, because first ever gig I went to was Jeremy from the Upbeats playing at the dirty cesspit that was Carbon on Litchfield Street.
Yep.
And never forget that night. And then I wanted to perform at Ministry, of course. At that point, that was the mecca for any drum and bass artist, whether you're an MC, producer, DJ, is to get on the stage at Ministry, especially being in Christchurch. And I got to do both of them on the Big Skeleton tour with the Upbeats, and got to perform with the Upbeats. It was mind-blowing. And at that point in time, there was a very split crowd in Christchurch around how they felt about MCs, especially on the heavy, darker, neurofunk sort of sounds. The neuro fans have always been a bit more critical of MCs than the jump up party drum and bass fans. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
100%, definitely.
And so, and actually, it was quite funny. I had one girl write on the Upbeats page, "Please do not let Camo MC perform on your set." So what I did was, and actually back then my personal page was Camo MC, because Facebook let you do that, and I added her on Facebook, and then wrote on her wall, "I'm looking forward to Ministry. I'll see you there," being the cheeky young MC that I was. And she actually came up to me afterwards, or messaged me afterwards, and said, "I'm really sorry, you absolutely smashed it." But if you want to check out Ministry, check out the Upbeats video clip with Chemo. There's a few other shows from around Europe and stuff, but you'll see the lines outside Ministry, and Upbeats at Ministry. That was the mecca back then, man.
Yeah, it was. I mean, some of the, we could go on for hours about this club, but I think we'll move on. How has it been for you guys down in Christchurch during the whole nation being in level 4 this time around? Gotten much done in the way of working on music or anything?
I have been, I've actually, the cool thing is, I think the first lockdown taught us how to be able to stay connected and stay creative despite not having events, or despite not being able to tour or go to the studio, or because I don't have a studio set up at home, a proper studio to record bars and stuff. So I can't record from home. I can't do music videos, but I can write music, and I can connect and network. I actually created and edited a video clip for my tune My G, which you can check out now, which is just a whole bunch of different videos from YouTube. The whole tune, it's like a nostalgia. I just honestly ripped a bunch of clips from YouTube of old school 90s movies, TV shows and cartoons, because the tune's like a bromantic kind of anthem about hanging with your homies. I just was like, you know what, I want to make a video, and I'm going to find a way. And I think that that's kind of like the attitude that I've kind of found myself in the lockdowns is I'm going to find a way to be creative. I'm going to find a way. I emailed my distributors at DRM and said, look, are you guys still running? Can I still set up my tunes to be released? You know, because I think it's really important for us as musicians and creatives to A, stay creative and keep creating, and B, also keep on with as much of the stuff we can still do in terms of releases coming out, because there's so much we can't do. So I think I kind of had this attitude. Yeah, it was hard on my mental health. You know, I don't do well in isolation. I live on my own, but I was video chatting with people overseas and connecting with labels, getting tunes signed. You know, I was still quite active throughout the level 4 that we had down here.
Nice, man. And well, obviously we're out of it now. The rest of the country is in level 2.5 or 2 Delta, as it's been called. And how is it looking down in Christchurch at the moment for the rollout of events? Have you sort of spoken or touched base with any of the promoters down there, and what's happening over the coming months with events?
So for myself, the main event that we've got coming up is my birthday bash. So that's been moved to October 30th at this stage. And now it's Camo Mc's spooky birthday bash because it's also Halloween weekend. So
nice.
That was Shout Resident for the idea of calling it the spooky birthday bash. Other than that, I'm not really often actively performing in Christchurch. I tend to perform more around the country, and I think that's partly because I've been playing here for like 10, 15 years, you know, and there's still so many cities that don't get to see what I do as often or haven't even seen what I've done before. So I tend to be focused on round the country rather than my hometown a lot of the time, which is common for a lot of artists. So the main one that we're waiting on is Dunedin was the gig we were about to do, which we're so amped for, and I've had a few students down there because I haven't performed in Dunedin in about 5 years, and managed to get a booking. So stoked. There's like 10 local DJs on the bill. It's so good, all guys or girls I've never heard before, and it's great to see. But the venue is waiting until level 1 is announced. So the promoters are just waiting, which is frustrating. It's hard, you know, like it's like we're going to find out within a week or so when our date's going to be. So it makes it very hard to plan other things. So I'm trying to plan, like, you know, as you know, as a creative, we're trying to plan music videos, we're planning photo shoots, and like I'm a dad through the week, so I only really have weekends or certain days to do what I need to do for myself. So it's hard, but we've just got to try and pencil stuff in and just roll with the punches. Like, what can we do, you know?
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, in Christchurch at the moment, there's a bit of an explosion of new producers coming out. I'm wondering if these are results of the lockdowns. What do you reckon? Absolutely.
I think a lot of the producers and DJs have come out of the lockdown. And I think another thing that's happened is the world has noticed us. And the world has noticed each other because the whole world has stopped. You know, I mean, yeah, UK is pretty crazy at the moment. They're going mental over there. It's cool to see. But in the last lockdown especially, we were all in lockdown across the world together. So there was this rare moment in time when all your favorite artists, producers, and DJs were at home doing absolutely nothing. So they were able to check out tunes. They were able to check out artists, connect with artists that they wouldn't have normally had the time and space to do so. So that's one of the major things I think we've seen is artists being able to capture international attention and international connections. That wasn't meant to rhyme, but there you go. When usually people would be a lot busier and unable to have the time and space to notice them.
Yeah, exactly. I reckon it was a good chance. I thought as well when we came out of New Zealand came out of the first lockdown, but then when sort of places like the States started to unfold, I was expecting a major musical boost to their festival lineups, but then you look at the lineups and it's exactly the same as it was before lockdown. It's like I don't know, are these guys locked into previous commitments, or are they just too afraid to go off a reservation and give those artists a try that were, making big waves via Twitch or their YouTube channels or whatever through their streaming or their podcasts, It's a weird one to watch because it was such a good opportunity to be able to restart and rebrand EDM music, but it kind of stayed exactly the same, which was, to me, it was kind of shocking.
At the same time, I did see some artists that might have had more traction coming out of lockdown lose traction because some people that really worked hard on their streams and connecting with people were made into stars over lockdown. Guys and girls that were both like kind of really just up and coming, not nobodies, but not really known in a big way, were able to connect. So yeah, there's a bit of both, I think. But, it's always hard because with the bigger festivals all across the world, people, I guess, like maybe they've got the perspective, they're like, we don't want to take a risk because we want to make sure that we make money. And I get that, but there's calculated risks, right? Because from the punter's point of view, do you really want to go and see the same lineup over and over again? Well, some people might and some people might not, so it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you want to draw crowds to your events, but yeah, cool. Get a couple of those massive big names, but align them with some of the up and coming artists that you want people to hear and be exposed to, because that's a great way to introduce your festival going fans to new music. You sort of bait them with the big headliner, but you place all the good up and coming acts around it, which I thought we might see, but not so much.
And in the same vein, though, salute to all the promoters and the events around New Zealand, especially.
I'm not talking about New Zealand, because New Zealand's on one at the moment, because we have really embraced, like, the promoters over here, when they had no other option but to embrace New Zealand acts.
True.
It was fucking amazing. You know what I mean? But
Absolutely.
Last New Year's, to me, easily one of the most special New Year's ever, because every event that I went to, there was a couple of international headliners, except for Festival of the Other Side, which was on in the Coromandel. It was 100% New Zealand music lineup, and it was all of my favorite artists, and a lot of them happen to be friends, so it was amazing to be able to see these people just absolutely flying the flag for New Zealand music and flourishing outside of lockdown,
Yeah, well, and I performed at Orm Festival. Do you know much about this festival, or?
AUM, yeah.
Yes,
Orm, yeah.
yes. So performed there for my first time with Matt Concord Dawn, and they are traditionally a bit more leaning towards the house and trance side of things, but this year on the last night, they put Concord Dawn with myself, a couple of other bass music acts, and I'm telling you, the reaction was crazy. And it was the same. It was a lot of New Zealand acts. Hell, they even had the Top Twins there. And I was like, I want to post it with the Top Twins. That wasn't like one of my goals as a drum and bass MC, but, and this year I'm playing there again, and Susie Cato's playing. So there you go. Might get Susie on a D&B tune. But yeah, me and Matt Concord Dawn did the last set on the Bush Theatre stage, and holy, it was insane, because the team at AUM, they were very smart. They left the drum and bass at the end, because you're not going to go to that festival necessarily as a hardcore drum and bass head, but there's always people that lean more to the junglist bass music side of things. And all those people had already had 2 days of predominantly not jungle drum and bass. So they were absolutely hanging for that 174, 175, and it was mental. We had 4 encores, and then the last encore, they were chanting 5 more hours. Which I understand, because imagine hanging out for the drum and bass. You just don't want it to stop once it starts. I'm like that at a festival.
Exactly. And also, they've been waiting 3 days, and they're probably 3 or 4 bags deep by now as well, and fucking, there's nothing like a good tempo change to really fucking get the blood pumping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. No, that was special. Shouts out Orm, shouts out AUM, John and all the crew there. As
an MC, I've seen you struggle to get on events. I know that you do events and all that sort of shit, and you get bookings, but I've also seen you with a wish list of events, Rhythm and Vines especially for you. You really have tried hard in the past to try and get on that lineup. And how has it worked out? You've not ended up getting any traction. You are pretty much New Zealand's #1 MC.
I think it's really hard for promoters and event managers to look at MCs as a headline act in their own right. I toured for years as a host MC, a hype MC. I toured around the country with Concord Dawn. I've MC'd with a lot of the biggest names in drum and bass and even EDM. But I got to the point where I needed to build up my own brand and my own show if I wanted to get booked. Because there's such a limited pool of headline acts that are going to request and be able to get an MC flowing, booked, put in a room, or even ultimately paid on their set. So I needed to build my own show. So that's what I started doing. And it's still really hard, I think, for promoters to get around their head that an MC can be more than just a hype man and rock a set, with a DJ being the kind of secondary side of the act and the MC being the highlight. I mean, MCs in the UK struggle with that, let alone New Zealand. And I think we're a little bit behind in the New Zealand scene when it comes to MC culture and jungle drum and bass.
Yeah, it is. It's very much just a drum and bass jungle kind of thing, because obviously hip hop's flourishing over here, and there are acts with their own stage shows and everything like that. But yeah, as a drum and bass MC for you, you've really had to try and stand out. I mean, obviously one way that you've done it in the past is by creating fucking hilarious music videos, which, you know, every time you've seen one through, they always put a fucking smile on my face, because I'm like, there's Cam, he's going in. He's just no holds barred on your music videos with onesie outfits and all sorts of weird shit going down. And if you're listening out there, do go and check out Cam. Like, do you want to give these guys a little bit of a link up of where they can go and check out some of your past music videos?
Yeah, I've got my own YouTube channel, so if you just look up Camo Mc on YouTube, there's heaps on there. And yeah, that's my personality. Anyone knows me knows I'm a bit of a joker and I don't take life too seriously. So I think it's important to stay true to who you are, you know, and like, I've just seen so many rap videos where it's just rappers with their posse on the stoop, rapping at the camera, rap. And for me, that's just boring. I mean, I'll do videos that are like that, but if you really want to catch people's attention, especially in the day of oversaturation and everybody's on social media, TikTok and everything, you've got to be doing something different to stand out. So the best way you can do that is be original and be yourself. And, you know, I love making people laugh and smile. It's just who I am, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, you do.
Which is hard in the drum and bass scene because it's so serious, you know? Like, it can be very, very serious.
There is an element of seriousness to drum and bass. It's I think it comes more from the techie side of the scene rather than the more musical, uplifting, poppy kind of stuff. You know, I think people there are just there to have fun in that music, but the people who are really passionate about neurofunk and tech and all that sort of stuff are very passionate about neurofunk and tech. Always been the way, bro, especially if you hail from Christchurch. Like we were so staunch on tech and all that sort of shit. And, you know, MC Green, he was the one that really opened my mind to having a local MC on, because obviously when we all started...
That's a throwback.
Yeah, it is, man. When we all started like playing events together and then putting on events and all that sort of shit, it was kind of like he was just starting out and he wasn't very good. None of us were very good, really, if you think about way back then, but it was still cool.
None of us were good when we started.
Yeah, but a lot of the music we were playing was so techie, it was so heavy, like the no U-turn stuff and a lot of the Bad Company shit, that it needed. We realized halfway through that when you looked out on the dance floor, there was no girls anymore. It was just dudes, and they're all fucking with their hoodies up and they're doing the classic neurofunk step. You know what I mean? But when you once we realized that when you add an MC into it and he's toasting along and adding a human element to it, and also able to chat to the girls, making sure that they're happy in the dance and all that sort of shit, and making sure everyone's having fun and like hyping everyone up, that was when we realized, it was like, there is definitely a place for that in New Zealand, especially because otherwise you run the risk of it becoming a sausage fest that is too overbearingly techie without a human element, you know what I mean?
So you're saying it's the MCs that bring the girls to the dance? Is that what? Is that what we're saying here?
Let's say it's the music, but it's the MCs that helps keep them there, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, yeah, it's interesting one, eh? And like, I think like you can't beat that human connection, you know? And the cool thing is, despite being one of the only MCs really pushing it out here, it's crazy when and doing the style that I bring to the table, because I've got a different taste and flavour that I bring to some of the other MCs. And recently I did my first headline spot in Rotorua at Lava Bar, and watching some of these 18 to 20-year-olds react when they see an MC double timing and bringing a real UK influence flow on top of drum and bass, it just blows their mind. They just haven't seen it live before. So in that way, it works in my favor because people just they're not exposed to it as much here.
Yeah, it's true. And also, I mean, the UK garage scene was the MCs in that scene where a lot of the MCs of today have taken their cues from as well, because that is very much focused on a little bit of song, a little bit of dance, a little bit of toasting, but very much like making sure that the girls are happy and that, you keep the girls at the dance, the guys are going to stay there, you can have a busy night the whole time, you know what I mean? The MCs are a huge part of that.
Totally, and it is something that I will unashamedly call out on the mic is if I see guys grabbing women inappropriately or if I see men getting too aggressive in the dance. And it's a hard one because I'm hyping the crowd up, so they're going to get aggressive and rowdy. But when you see girls getting crushed and they're not having a good time, it's important. I'll get the DJ to wheel up the tune, and you got to do it in a way where it's not going to ruin the vibe of the dance, because you don't want to call them out too hard. Because like recently, like I was in Ashburton of all places, and doing a set, and it was starting to get quite rocking, and someone threw their shoe at me.
Jesus.
And it hit me hard in the chest, and I was like, what's going on here? And I got angry, like it was quite, and I got Rez to pull up the tune, and I said, look, don't throw stuff at us or we're going to get off the stage. But I think I was too aggressive because I kind of killed the vibe a little bit. So it's a fine line between calling people out and making sure that there's a good vibe going in the dance. There's a real way to go about it, But
I think one of the worst things that happened in EDM and dance music in general, mainly at festivals, was mosh pits, man. It sort of gave young cats, especially bros and breathers, like creative license to just fuck up the dance for a second, you know what I mean? It's not, you look at the front row of any festival and there's a mosh going on behind, all those people along the front lines are getting crushed up, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's not like, it doesn't look like anyone's enjoying themselves. And then some cats are coming out of those moshes with broken noses, broken collarbones, broken arms. Like, it's mad, bro. I just don't understand how that infiltrated. I know it is a huge part of the rock scene and the grunge scene from back in the day. And I know that there's huge similarities between the popularity of drum and bass and rock music in different eras, you know what I mean? But like I say at the moment, like if you put drum and bass and rock music on the same timeline, we'd be in the age of Evanescence, you know what I mean, right now. But these kids are all they've all like been given creative license for it to go ahead and do it. Like MCs like DJs invite them to cause to do mosh pits, and it's actually like causing more damage than it is doing good.
I think personally, because I came through as a metal rock punk head in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's what we were doing. We were going to metal rock shows because that was, like you said, the sound of the time, and I think there's a big difference between a mosh pit and a circle pit. Mosh pit to me is just a rammed in dance floor with people bouncing off each other, which I don't see an issue with. But when it comes to circle pits, creating a circle to run into each other violently and aggressively, there's no place for that in drum and bass. And the reason especially there's no place for it is because when you're in a metal gig, you expect that. You expect that level of aggression. I've seen guys doing this to like melodic, uplifting drum and bass. This music's made to lift your soul off. It's not made for you to smash and bash into each other. And the problem is, especially with these crowds not being educated on circle pits and not understanding the culture that comes with it, in a metal gig, they understand it. The females understand it. They know there's going to be circle pits. They might even get involved in the circle pits. But at a D&B gig, people are there to skank and dance. It's more of like a reggae sort of skank out flex than it is a heavy metal mosh pit. Although there's elements of both. And I guess that's where you get the crossover of so many different cultures that come into drum and bass, because there's elements of rock and metal, there's elements of reggae, there's elements of soul. But really, if it's violent, there's no place for it. I think that's what it comes down to. If it's too aggressive, too violent, don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the entire scene was built on unity, you know what I mean? Back in the day, if you go back right to the very core, the essence of dance music, well, the acid house movement in the UK, field raves, everything like that, Spiral Tribe and the unity, that was the foundations of hardcore, breakbeat, jungle, drum and bass, you know what I mean? And that evolution. And at no point in time did moshing or circle pits ever come into that equation, you know? Everyone was too high. Everyone was too fucked up on like really good ecstasy back in those days to really to want to do that, you know what I mean? Like if you're going to get close to someone, you're going to hug them.
Yeah, and like it was funny, and I'll touch on the drugs thing in a sec, but the thing is also one of my mates who's involved in one of the bigger D&B promotions companies, he said to me, look, what did you do when you were younger? You did circle pits, mosh pits. This is just the young people way of expressing. This is their rock and metal, which you kind of referred to, but it's hard, you know, because we want to educate them. And yeah, the drugs thing as well, you know, like back in our day, you go see your dealer and they'd tell you what you were taking. They'd be very honest with it. I remember getting pills, ecstasy pills, and the dealer saying to you, look, you need to drink water with this. You don't drink any alcohol on it. These days, drugs are just churned out to people with no explanation on what they are or what to do or how to take it. It's like when you go to, you know, a shop to buy anything, they're going to educate you, you know. So I think it's partly on the responsibility of the people that are pushing the drugs out there to actually be telling people how to use them accordingly. But, you know, that's a whole different conversation, really.
Yeah, I mean, drugs in the dance scene, hand in hand since day one. It's never going to change. There's always going to be bad drugs floating around or dealers that are fucking cutting their shit or whatever. But yeah, it's a whole other podcast and on a whole different channel. I think it's more of a health related one. It's like, yeah, I've seen the way that, you know, in the past, drugs have been portrayed in the media, and I can, you know, all of us coming from the dance scene, we can all stand hand on heart and say it's not like that all the time. You know what I mean? When there's bad drugs. I guess
I'm the opposite of that because I'm clean and sober, you know.
Yeah,
and
right.
I've been off drugs and alcohol for almost 7 years now. And actually it was the opposite for me because when I first got clean and sober in that rave scene around 05, 06, 07 in Christchurch, it helped me stay sober because I'd be going to gigs and nobody would be asking what I was on or trying to peer pressure me to get messed up. I think it would have been harder to me to get clean and sober if I was hanging out with a bunch of rugby heads. But because I was going to drum and bass raves and everyone was really there for the music. They really were, because it was cool, but it wasn't that cool. You know, it was a good time. It was a vibe. So for me, and I actually wrote a whole tune about it called Drum and Bass Saved My Life, produced by Comrade Subs, absolute legendary producer. But that tune, essentially my whole verse that I wrote is about me going into rehab, coming back out of rehab, being concerned that people aren't going to want to hang out with me anymore because I'm not drinking and drugging, but finding that everyone just accepted me for who I am. So I'm an absolute example that no, that is not true. That stigmatism is not true. There's drugs and alcohol in every single scene. But yeah. Like you said, we could do a whole podcast just on that topic.
Yeah. I mean, you've always been very vocal about the fact that you overcame addiction and all that, you know, so it's not, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of people out there in the scene right now who may be going through some shit, so hearing this might be doing them some good, you know what I mean? But there is always light at the end of the tunnel, especially if you're dealing with multiple styles of addiction at once or one heavy addiction, you know what I mean? But music at the end of the day as well is a great way to just tune out from it and try and find some solace as well, you know.
And the cool thing is now, the younger guys, and probably the girls as well, but I think a lot of the guys, being another male in the scene that's clean and sober, I have had some younger DJs and producers hit me up about how did you get clean and sober, you know, and I find that really cool because there's not a lot of people in the scene in recovery, you know, there's different levels to it, not everyone's got a problem, but it feels cool to be able to have that you know, I don't know. I know you've had this too. A lot of the younger guys call me uncle now. I'm not sure
oh, mate,
how I feel about that.
It grinds my gears, bro. It grinds my gears. It's like, I'm not uncle. I've got some grey hairs now, but I'm not uncle.
I've just kind of owned it with the local up-and-coming. It's all the local up-and-coming D&B guys in Christchurch.
At least it's kind of nice being, you know, given the title. It's almost like you're a kaumātua when the kids are calling you uncle. The next step from Uncle was Koro, and I'm not keen on Koro, you know what I mean?
No, I'm not. I draw the line in the sand with Koro. Yeah.
Totally. Well, bro, like, I did touch on the fact that Christchurch has had a resurgence of producers. Do you want to give us a run through of your top picks of who we should be watching out for over the coming months/years?
Down in Christchurch, I think one guy that I think is really dope is the homeboy Yen. This guy hit me up years ago when he was like, I think he was like 15, like trying to get gigs and like trying to get on the radio. At that point, he was mostly doing dubstep, but he's kind of moved on now. He's must be like 19, maybe 20, maybe even 18, but he's still very, very young. His dad, Mark, is an old school drummer, used to drum in a band called Teos, so he's got that musical blood, you know, and that knowledge from, you know, and it's quite funny. I tell his mates, Trey's dad, Trey's his actual name, is actually used to drum in a drum and bass band. They're, oh my God, my tradie, and I tell them this stuff. Do not show off your dad, I'll show him off for you. But Yen's definitely one to watch.
Apple's not falling far from the tree there.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So Yen's definitely one to watch. Also, CSM down here, great. His last tune he's released is quite liquid, but I think he's working on a lot of jump up tunes. But I want to see more of these guys actually dropping tunes. You know, like I feel like producers, they hold on, but I really encourage people to like get their stuff out there. But Yen, CSM, that's two definitely to watch.
Nice. I think it's hard. It's so daunting as a young producer to really take that step off the ledge and fucking put yourself out there, you know, because you're so open to criticism after that. And also, like, a lot of these kids are growing up with social media as well, and like, you know, fucking having people giving instant reactions, whether it's positive or negative feedback, and sometimes it can stifle your willingness to sort of really put yourself out there for fear of being seen as failing or getting fucking shit online or whatever. But I think people need to really just, especially for the drum and bass scene in New Zealand needs it. The thing that drives drum and bass in New Zealand is production as well as promotion, you know. So I think now is the time because there's a lot less noise at the moment, you know what I mean? And
also, while we're talking about up-and-comers, MCs. Come on, let's see some more MCs in New Zealand.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think I've seen a lot of hip-hop guys sort of cottoning on to the UK, sort of Afrobeat, drill, grime sort of stuff recently. And I feel like a lot of them would actually find their footing over faster beats with, like, you know, drum and bass and the dance or something like that. Just imagine like mellow downs over the upbeats or some shit like that. You know, like
Well, Diggy Dupé just dropped the UK garage tune.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly.
Really, really dope tune. And yeah, actually, what has happened locally is I've had a lot of the brothers and sisters, Pacific Island, Māori MCs that have been traditionally really hip-hop and grown up more around urban communities where hip-hop's been blasted in every household and they're not really exposed to drum and bass. But thanks to me doing it locally, a lot of these hip-hop guys in Christchurch especially have been coming up to me and going, bro, I want to do drum and bass. And my last tune that I released, My G, with Furious Hori. Furious is an up-and-coming hip-hop MC. We did a tune I did a drum and bass Christmas album last Christmas. The world's first ever drum and bass Christmas carol. Santa is a D in bed and Merry Drum and
Camo
Bass Christmas.
Buble.
Camo claws up in this. And I did a tune called Let the Sun Shine. I got the bro Furious on it, and we ended up doing a video for it, and my bro D-Tech, who's on it in Sydney, was like, look, should we do a video? And I was already doing one clip, and I was like, I don't know if I got the budget. And he's like, should we just film our summers and then chuck it together, film it on our phones? I'm like, yeah, easy, because then just need to edit it, you know, and film on the phone. Low cost, easy. And I said to Furious, because he was already on the tune, do you want to come on the road with us and open on a couple of the shows? And then we will get some footage of it. And I didn't ask him to do any drum and bass in the set. I was quite happy for him to open and do some clubby, trappy, hip-hop stuff. But he actually linked up with his other bro in their crew and started writing drum and bass tunes to open for us, which was cool to see. So that stuff for me is wicked. So I ended up linking with Furious and doing a tune with him. And that stuff's cool because it's creating an MC culture in New Zealand on 175, because so much of it over the years here has been more about the host. But now, worldwide, vocal drum and bass is huge.
Absolutely huge.
It's a genre within itself, and it's getting almost in the UK as big as grime. When you've got guys like Azza and Grimer, you've got obviously X-Men and Evil B doing their thing, you got SAS, you got all these crews where the MCs are the front man and the DJ is still there. I mean, no matter what, whether it's a perceived front man, it's still a relationship between a DJ and an MC. Neither of us are really more important than the other. We can't exist without each other. But it's cool to sometimes have a set where it's more about the MC being in the front than the MC taking a back seat to the DJ. But even then, you got to give some room for the DJ, right? But yeah, so that's what I want to see more of in New Zealand. But really, we've had a good start because the one and only legend, Tali, like, she's prolific in vocal drum and bass. Yep. And she released one of the world's first ever vocal drum and bass albums, you know.
And charted in the UK, which is, you know, the podcast I've done with Tali is such an amazing story. It's such a brilliant story for New Zealand drum and bass, and just for a New Zealand artist in general. And she's so honest, and it's freaking awesome. I can't wait for everyone to hear it. But while we're on the subject of what makes a good MC, if you are talking about, you know, the next generation coming through, what should they be focusing on? What makes a good MC in Camo MC's eyes?
For a start, I've seen too many MCs coming out in the scene and saying, I'm just a hype MC. No, you're either MC or you're not. Bring bars to the table. At the same time, one Christchurch drum and bass producer, DJ Dosey was the first one that called me out. Absolute legend in New Zealand D&B as well. Absolute
legend. Shout out Dosey.
One of the first guys to really bring me up and give me a chance. And he said to me, look, nobody cares what you're rapping about. He literally, you say this to a rapper, and I was like, fuck you, man. In my head, I don't know if I actually said fuck you. I may have, you know, we did have a pretty open dialogue. But he said, you need to be up saying things that uplift the crowd, that are on a vibe, that are either high or rolling with the vibe of the music, about unity, bringing people together. So I think there's a few things. Write bars, have bars. Also, write your hype lines. Think of how you're going to talk to the crowd. Don't just go off the cuff. Think about everything you're going to do on that stage. Let the DJ breathe. And one good thing that Jabs pulled me up on, another MC legend in New Zealand, when I was
legendary, shout out Jabsy.
Shout out Jabs. When I was emceeing at Rock Pool back in the day, you know, the Rock Pool in Christchurch ended up being, this is crazy, it was a pool bar that ended up becoming a drum and bass hotspot. And that's how hot Christchurch drum and bass was. This pool bar, there was like mostly pool tables, and when we had like this massive crowd like rocking to D&B, it was crazy. Anyways, Jabs pulled me up and said, don't MC on the mix, because that's the DJ's time to shine. That's when they're making music live, putting two tracks together, creating their own blend. Now, I don't think you should not MC on the mix always, but it is something to keep in mind. But yeah, stage presence, flow, and actually listen to other MCs and check out what they're doing. But yeah, and also, yeah, please, no just hype MCs. Bring some bars. You know, some bars.
I asked the same question to Tiki, and he was just adamant. It was just one thing. It was like, don't rock up and fucking ask me for a go on the mic mid bars.
Oh my gosh, here's another one. Rapping at me while I'm rapping. What are you doing? I cannot hear you. I'm trying to focus on my flow and what I'm doing. You're rapping different bars at me from the front row of the crowd while I'm rapping. That's another no-no. Don't do that, please.
There you have it. Straight from the horse's mouth.
But I agree with Chicky. Don't ask me for the mic.
Yeah, right. Well, bro, thanks for joining us, man. It's been awesome to catch up, and thanks for being so honest. And you know, like, just you know, there might be a bunch of MCs out there at the moment who are like, you know what, fuck it, I'm on. Let's do this. I've got bars. I can do that for sure. So he's hoping you just inspired someone to get out there and start developing their skills and teaming up and creating their own little community within a community.
Yeah, and hit me up on my socials, Camo Mc everywhere, Instagram, bloody even TikTok, everywhere.
Bro,
hit me
you're
up.
too old for TikTok, bro.
Bro, TikTok is the future. I'm telling you, man, like TikTok is the future. I ain't doing funky dance moves on there, but watch the space.
Yeah, there's a use for everything, for sure. Nice one, bro. Well, thanks so much for your time, man, and we shall definitely see you on stage and around the festies, and God forbid we actually get out of lockdown nationwide and are able to proceed with festivals this summer. But we'll be in touch, man, and thanks so much for sharing your story.
Big up to yourself, big up Bulletproof, big up everything you've done to support me and give me a chance at a youngster, and also big up everyone that's supporting drum and bass, especially MC culture in Aotearoa. See you at a rave very soon. Big up.
There you have it. That was another episode of the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass. Catch you next time.
You've been listening to the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass series. For episode schedules and podcast information, follow us at NZ D&B Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, with new episodes weekly on all major podcasting platforms. This is the History of New Zealand Drum and Bass.